Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will. All I have and call my own. You've given it all to me, and to you, Lord, I return it. Everything is yours. Do with it what you will. Give me only your love and your grace, and that is enough for me. Beautiful prayer by St. Ignatius of Loyola. Welcome to Exploring Catholicism, where we go deeper into areas of our Catholic faith, our church, which in many ways is seen as Jesus's bridegroom. The Lord blesses us with his love and gives his life to the church and calls her his bride. And so today we go behind the scenes of Jesus's bride, this beautiful church that we call our Catholic Church. And especially, I think sometimes, at least for me, when I was growing up, I always thought church was just like a Sunday thing that you do. I hope today we can kind of go behind the scenes and see the daily chores of the bride of Christ and how the Lord can radiate through such incredible people that work in our church. Parish life is many facets to it, and perhaps today we'll get a chance to go behind the scenes to see some of the facets of parish life that we don't always see if we are just there for Sunday Mass. And so who better to help us see the face of Jesus's bride than our own pastoral minister, Karen Walker. Karen is an accomplished principal, skilled at ASL interpreting. She was my boss, but now the tables have been switched and I'm now, quote unquote, her boss. She inspires our ministry group. She keeps the schedule. She offers tremendous heart of bereavement to those who are mourning, the sacraments, the outreach, RCIA, evangelization. I could go through a plethora of things. You could have her job description described as a smorgasbord, but I prefer to see her as kind of the air traffic controller of all those things that land and take off from the busy parish of Saints John and Paul, which is a part of the great grouping. She's also a proud mom of 2 girls, and I believe she even owns a little doggy and has to put up with voles on a daily basis. So welcome, Karen. Thanks for being here today. Is it true that your daughter, Emily, surprised you for the 4th of July by hiding in the trunk of a car?
Yes, she did. So Emily lives in Portland, Oregon, and I have been trying to find a way to go out and visit her. And it's challenging in this time of the coronavirus. You know, you don't know if it's safe to travel by plane. So recently I called her and she wasn't home, and that's kind of surprised me. And my other daughter, Teresa, called back about a half hour after I'd called Emily and said, hey, how about if I come over and visit? So the next night she came over, and when she pulled up, she said, you know, I've got a lot of stuff in my trunk. Can you come help me empty it? And I went out and she opened the trunk and there was Emily. So I said, did you drive all the way from Greenfield in the trunk of the car? And they said, no, we put her in the trunk right around the corner. So your neighbors are now really suspicious about what's going on here. So,
that's good to hear.
But it was
So
great
it's kind
that
of a great
they
4th of July fireworks that you weren't expecting.
We had fun. Yeah, I was so happy to see her, and don't get to see her often enough.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, just talking a little bit about your own family. You have one brother who was 15 months older, and a sister is about 10. Where did you grow up? Tell a little bit about your family life.
So I grew up in Westmoreland County, just over the border from Allegheny County in Rostraver Township. My mom and dad had a nice house with 2 acres across the street from a farm. So we grew up baling hay and driving tractors and doing some farm stuff, showing sheep at the township fair. And
baling hay, that's not fun to do when it's hot July.
No, it's always
it's about
hot.
90 some degrees, and especially when poison ivy gets mixed in. Did you ever experiences like that?
Yeah, poison ivy is, a bad thing for me. Well, I was the youngest kid in the neighborhood, so I instead got to drive a big old truck that pulled the hay wagon in the field. When I was like 10 or 12, I started driving.
Now, the hay bales, were those more the kind of the rectangular kind?
Yeah, the rectangular ones.
So then
so you have to lift them and throw them on. Yeah, and then they had the big claw that picked them off the wagon and took them up in the barn. Yeah. So yeah, my dad was a laboratory technician at Westinghouse at Bettis, and my mom was basically a stay-at-home mom. She worked part-time as a secretary on and off throughout our lives. She was the one of the teacher's aides at the junior high. So when I got to junior high, I got away with nothing because all the teachers already knew who I was.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Belle Vernon Area School District my whole life, graduated from Belle Vernon Area High School. And my brother is 15 months older than me. His name is William, and my sister Marianne is 10 years younger than me. Yeah.
Now, your dad was not originally a Catholic, is that right?
That's right. So my mom is a cradle Catholic, but my dad was not raised Catholic. He really didn't have a whole lot of faith life growing up. When my sister was born and I was about 12 or 13, he decided to join the Catholic Church. But for a long time when I was little, I didn't realize he wasn't Catholic because he came to church with us every Sunday. But at that point in his life, he decided to join the Catholic Church. And then he was in the Knights of Columbus, and he and my mom did a lot of things through their church life. Yeah.
Did you ever talk to your dad about his faith, why he made the decision to join the Catholic Church, or what was his faith like growing up as a non-Catholic?
Didn't really talk about that very much, but I think it was just when he married my mom, again, devout Catholic, and I think he just wanted to be doing what our family was doing, and coming to church, and again, always came with us. So I think he just felt comfortable there and wanted to finally make it official.
Were there any specific devotions or things that you guys did as a family? Maybe celebrating Christmas, doing things that you kind of think back to?
So unlike your family, which you often say has a very large, small family, right? So my family really is small. So my mom has one brother and my dad had one sister. She's passed away. So it was really just the five of us a lot of the time celebrating together. My paternal grandparents lived in California. My mom's parents died both very young. So we just had our little nuclear family, but there was another family across the street, the DeCarios, and we would get together with them. And Ralph was like one of my dad's best friends. He was very Italian, so we would go over there and have a great time. And Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve.
Did you do like the 7 fishes?
Oh yeah,
and all that stuff,
yeah, lots of celebrating with that. So we had a good time with that. Yeah.
And when your dad converted and all that type of stuff, what would you say impacted you in terms of thinking about taking care of your parents and where they are now? You've seen your dad make adjustments from faith, and now today, especially, they're still around and you've had to take care of them now at this point. How has that been? So you were their daughter, now in some sense you're like their parents.
Well, my parents just celebrated 62 years of marriage in June. And my dad is 89 and my mom is 82. And they recently sold their house. They had been living in their large house with 2 acres, over 50 years, 53 years, we'll say. So back in November, they made the tough decision to move into an independent living center. So I take care of them somewhat, but they are actually still doing very well on their own. But when the coronavirus hit, they did a very nice job of staying in place and not going out, social distancing. So thankfully, the unit that they live in is on the first floor. So I go to the grocery store and I can walk around the back of the building and they have their sliding glass door and I can deliver some groceries to them on the porch. So, they're doing extremely well for the age that they are. But yeah, it's a real joy to have them close. My sister lives in Bellevue, so we're both close to them. So
it just seems like a common challenge for all of us is that eventually our parents are going to get older and the children are going to be responsible for trying to take care of them. What was it like to have your dad move after 55 years?
It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun because I moved a year ago. I had lived in my house for 27 years, 28 maybe. It wasn't fun for me. I mean, that's a long time to accumulate a lot of stuff, especially in the attic and the basement. So when my parents made the decision to move, it was pretty challenging just to go through their stuff. So you're asking about like taking care of them. I will say one of the things my mom always says to me, I've asked her, well, as my girls grew up, like at what age do I have to stop worrying about my kids? And she always says, I'll let you know. So I think, I'm taking care of them to some degree, but my parents still, worry about me. I'm still their kid. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Now, talk a little bit about your dear husband, Russ. You met him at Trinity Middle School. You were doing cafeteria duty, and what did you do? Throw food at him?
No.
Was there a food fight going on? What was going on there?
So it was a middle school cafeteria. I started working there in 1982. was my first job out of college, and he and I both had cafeteria duty. So I met him my first day of working on cafeteria. So they were flying mashed potatoes, but it wasn't me or him. No, it wasn't me throwing them.
I was thinking that was you.
No.
Okay.
No.
So you put him aside for 6 years, you said? You
Well,
met
right.
him there,
I knew
and
who he
then-
was. He taught reading. I taught math. We were at opposite ends of the building. So I was teaching math and computer science. I had a room full of computers. That was 1982, 83. They were TRS-80 color computers with 16K memory, and you had to keep the programs. You stored them on a cassette drive and played them back. That's how old I am. So Russ wanted to get a computer for his classroom. He wanted to get a grant to buy a computer for his classroom. And so he asked me to write a program that would help, a tutorial type program for the kids, which I did. He got the grant, and he got a really super new, nice Apple II GS computer. And I was really not pleased. I was using the old ones, but yeah. Then
the power of those computers compared to what we have in our cell phone
I
today
know.
is a little different, right?
So he bought me Sarah's chocolate covered pretzels, and then that
won your
hooked
heart.
me. Yeah.
Well, that's a good way to know that. And then when did you guys get married?
We got married in the summer of 1988, August 7th, 1988.
And talk a little bit about your husband was not Catholic either, just similar to
correct.
kind of like what you experienced with your dad.
Yeah. So Russ was raised Lutheran. Pretty much fell away from the faith as an adult. Not sure we could classify him as agnostic or atheist or whatever. I feel his faith was still there. So when we got married, he would come to church with me sporadically, especially, Christmas and Easter when the kids were receiving a sacrament. And then he started coming more frequently, started really getting involved. But Russ read a lot. He was a voracious reader and read a lot about different faiths. I was very interested in all of them. So I told you, evangelizers would come to the door, and he would invite them in and debate them.
Like the Jehovah's Witnesses,
yes,
right?
They would
come. They have
to
a friend named Tony.
Yes, they would come to the door, and I didn't want to really engage in that, but they would sit and just like for an hour kind of go at it about what they believed. So that's how he was. But in 1999, he decided to go through RCIA. So Father John Haney was a pastor at St. Gabe's, St. Gabriel the Sorrowful Virgin in Whitehall, where I was a parishioner before coming here. And Russ really liked Father Haney and decided to, he really surprised me. I had not been like promoting that.
I mean, what were the circumstances? He just came and said, I'm just going to become Catholic?
Well, he started coming to church more often. And then he said one day, I think I want to go through, they talked about RCIA at Mass, and he said, I think I want to do that. So he went through RCIA and entered the church in Easter Vigil of 2000.
Since he was well-read, was there anything in particular that you remember that was key for him to discover about the faith? Sometimes I know I have friends that the Eucharist was one of the things that was difficult, and once they understood that, they were able to work through it, or the teaching on our Blessed Mother. Was there something that you remember, or was it just in general he just started to feel
I think his heart was opened, and I think he did struggle with confession, for one thing. Didn't understand why it was important to confess to a priest as opposed to just talking to God directly. I think that was maybe a struggle for him. But no, I think it was just a gradual acceptance of what he was hearing at Mass. Yeah.
Probably also a witness of his bride.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe a little.
So he joins the faith then. Also, obviously, in your marriage, you're blessed with 2 girls. So brag about your girls, Emily and Teresa. Teresa's married now.
Teresa
and
is
Emily's the one that was in the trunk.
In the trunk, right. So Emily's the older one. She's 29. She lives in Portland, Oregon. She works for Intel. She's a computer engineer, computer and electrical engineer for Intel out in Hillsboro. And Teresa,
are those the girls there?
That's the biker chicks, right? When they were much younger. So Emily's the one on the tricycle with the beads around the neck, the blonde-haired one, and Teresa's the one with the snappy hat riding the little Fisher Price mobile.
And how about now?
Yeah, that's still the same. Yeah.
So which one's which?
Emily's the blonde-haired one. It's less obvious there with the red dress on the left, and Teresa's the one on the right. That's at Teresa's wedding reception.
And-
So Emily is 29, again, lives in Portland. Teresa is 20, I'm sorry, yeah, Emily's 29. Teresa is 28. She's the one who got married. She works for PPG as a research librarian. She does patent searches for the scientists who live there or work there.
So now you guys grew up in Whitehall, is that right?
Right.
That's where you
So
guys
the
were.
girls where we live.
And one of the things that was growing up was obvious that was important was just Russ's family. And there was somebody who you had talked to me about, Kenny.
Mhm.
Talk about Kenny. Who's Kenny? He was born with just a little different way of being
Right.
born. And talk about this character in your family, a cousin of some sort, right?
No, he's my brother-in-law.
Your brother-in-law. I'm sorry. Okay, so
That's
very
okay.
close with Russ. Yeah.
So Russ was one of 6 children. He was the 4th boy, and he had a younger brother, and then finally the 6th one was a girl, Susie. So Kenny was his closest, oldest brother. And Kenny was born with 1 leg and 1 kidney, and had to have his spine fused when he was in junior high. So only grew to about 4'8", 4'10", somewhere in that range. So when he was born back in the day, that was when it was suggested to his family that they just put him in a home somewhere, and his mother and dad wouldn't hear of it. So I remember them telling me they bought a big ball, like a blow-up ball, and then for him to learn to stand up on 1 leg and learn to lean on the ball, and that's how he learned to stand. But when he was, I don't know, a young guy, maybe 10, 12, the community, Russ's parents were not very wealthy at all. His dad had quit school after 6th grade, and his mom quit school after 8th grade to help earn some money for their families. So they didn't have enough money to purchase an artificial leg. So the chief of police and some people in the community bought an artificial leg for Kenny. That's the picture there that they're showing. And he was so overjoyed to have that artificial leg that there he has thrown his crutches away.
That's amazing. The picture captures the crutches.
Yeah, yeah. So Kenny grew up and became a successful businessman. He had an associate's degree from Penn State. He owned his own business called Contract Employment Service, and he was just like a real big part of our family. He died on Thanksgiving Day in, I believe, 1997. And that was one of the points in our life, Russ and I, that I think it was an eye-opener. He died suddenly of a heart attack. And it was a transition moment for us because we both stopped and thought, what are we doing? What are we doing with our lives? You know, where are we going? I think in some way that's one reason why Russ decided to join the Catholic Church only a few years later, you know. So that was the point in my life that I thought, I was substitute teaching, which I hated because you know me, I like control. And substitute teaching is the phone rings at 6 a.m. and somebody says, can you go be the biology teacher over here? Or can you go, you know, I hated it. So when Kenny died, I stopped that. That was an easy choice. And I thought, what do I really want to be doing with my life? I'd always wanted to learn American Sign Language. So because I was home, basically caring for the kids and for Russ's mom, I decided to take a class in American Sign Language, and then that led to another class, and I ended up getting an associate's degree in interpreting. So
if somebody was out there today, could you say, hello, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
Can you say, God bless you? So what's it like to interpret for me when I,
oh yeah,
when I throw Greek
that's fun.
and Hebrew at you?
Well, the biblical terrible towel statement was.
How do you say biblical terrible towel?
So Bible terrible towel, which is what you do with a Steelers terrible towel, right?
So Karen has a lot of experience trying to interpret my brain, which is very scary. But one of those things she does is that the homilies she'll interpret for those who are hearing impaired, right?
Mm-hmm.
So before we move on, so your dear husband in 2014, January 14th, passed from this world to the next.
Yeah.
He had cancer.
Right.
What do you remember about that?
So we had just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary and had gone to Canada. We went to St. Joseph's Oratory there, and
see Brother Andre.
Yes.
Oh,
so we were on this trip of Canada, and we came back we went on the trip in July. we came back, and in August he had a couple bumps on his neck. He went to get them examined, went to an ENT. They did a biopsy, and they said this is serious. And he was diagnosed with cancer on September 11th, 2013. So I remember being in the oncologist's office, and they put the CT scan up on the screen, and it was just all through him. And it was just, I couldn't believe it, because there was no symptoms except those couple bumps on his neck. He had gone on a 25-mile bike ride with my brother-in-law, just a few weeks before. So I was in shock. And I told people, I heard this noise, and I realized later it was me gasping for air.
Right. And,
you just don't see stuff like that coming. So,
it was very sudden.
Yeah. So they threw everything at it. He started chemo, I think, 2 days later. The doctors at Hillman were wonderful. They did everything that they could, but it just consumed him. It really did. So within 4 months, he had passed, January 9th, 2014. So.
Now, do you see that influencing your own ministry? You're involved in different things, as that part of your life obviously is something that affects everything that you are, but you're involved with the beginning experience, and I know even here you do a lot with bereavement. So how has that affected you in terms of being able to help others?
Well, again, I was just stunned. I didn't see it coming. And, I talked about when Kenny died, that was another, like, boom. Your world just falls apart. You don't know really what to do. For a while, I was in shock, and so I could keep functioning. But then after a month or so, it just becomes real. It doesn't seem real at first. So I work with people at St. John and Paul who come in and who are planning a funeral. So I feel I can bring compassion to that part of my work, just from having experienced it and understanding. And everybody's grief is different. It's not like I understand it completely, but just to bring that compassion to what I'm doing in that line of work, I think is really helpful. The beginning experience with the apostolate that I'm involved with, I went to my first beginning experience weekend only about 3 months after Russ passed away. And they have the weekend like twice a year. I don't know how I would have made it to fall. Like, I went in March. Had I not gone to that, I don't know
Is it
how I would
because,
have made it to fall.
this is a phrase I thought you used before, that it's easy to get stuck.
Yes.
And the beginning experience helped you at least be able to work with that.
Right.
Is that
right?
right
Yeah,
way to
that's
phrase it?
exactly right. So everyone who's a team person, a team leader there, it's for people who are divorced or widowed. And people look at that and say, how can those two groups of people, why are they in the same group together? It's because you don't ever anticipate that your marriage will end. So you don't get married saying, oh, this might end in divorce someday, right? You don't get married thinking my spouse might die someday, right? So it's the same kind of grief. Everybody's grief is different. So, everybody's in different places and experiencing it differently. But often you feel like, I think of the story of the friends who brought the paralytic to Jesus and wanted to get that paralytic to Jesus. So they opened the roof and got him down there. They're like, you have to get to Jesus. You're stuck. You're paralyzed. You can't go forward. We need to get you to Jesus. And that's where the healing happens. So that's what the beginning experience group hopefully does. You get people who are stuck, they're paralyzed, they can't go forward with their lives, and you get them back to the church, back to Jesus, and say, this, it's not going to all be better. There's no light switch we can throw to make this all better, but we're going to get you to Jesus and he's going to heal you. And that's pretty much the mission behind that group. And it's just been really, really powerful for me. I've been involved again for like 6 years, and you see people from all over the place. Some people are angry at God that this happened to them. Some people are depressed. Some people have a lot of guilt. Maybe I should have done this. Maybe this would have gone better. All of them, if you get them back to Jesus, that's where the healing can happen. So it's just a great organization to be involved with. And
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that made our relationship grow too, because
Mhm.
I was praying with you through those times, but it's also inspiring. I've been invited by you to participate in some of the beginning experience moments, and they have what weekend retreats. They also
They
have
do.
get-togethers. I was even at a party at your house.
Yes,
I
you
mean,
did.
don't tell
Yeah.
anybody. But so what are some of the other facets to beginning experience?
Well, so they also started what's called a one-day coping with life alone. So we found some people would not or could not commit to a weekend. So the weekends are in the spring and the fall, and it's at Martinez Spiritual Renewal Center, and it goes through all of the process of Kubler-Ross's stages of grief and talks and witness talks and sharing with each other. Some people can't come for a weekend. Maybe they have children, maybe they have caring for an elderly parent or work on the weekends. So we started a one-day program so that people could just, 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, I think, till 3 or 4. And so you come for one day, and hopefully that would encourage people to maybe sign up for a weekend down the road. They also do coping with life alone for over the course of 9 sessions, which is what you helped us with when you were at St. Simon and Jude, where you spend 2 hours once a week if you can't come for a weekend, and you go through the process that way. So lots of different facets and ways to help people.
Yeah, and I think if anybody's watching out there and would like to call us at our parish or just send us a note, Karen would be more than willing to introduce you to the beginning experience or walk you through some of those things.
Sure.
I know that we run both bereavement groups and things of that nature. And I think I really love that image. I appreciate that. I know for me, just to think about you feeling stuck and needing somebody to bring you to Jesus, that gospel passage, I think for anybody today who's lost a loved one, just to contemplate that, just to think, how can I be brought to Jesus? If I feel stuck, it's going to be through Christ, because he is the way, the truth, and the life. That could help us find meaning and hope in the loss like that. And then just kind of more recently, you told me that you were struck by a book by Father Jacques Philippe on Saint Therese. And I believe what you said was that the realization that humility is not self-deprecation, but is accept our failures and weaknesses as spiritual poverty. What was it about the Way of Trust by Jacques Philippe on the life of Saint Therese that really has been sparking in your heart these days?
Well, I will admit, I think I'm only in chapter 3.
That's okay.
So Anne McCarthy, who does one of our Bible studies, gave the book to me. She's always very generous with, whenever she's doing a Bible study, she'll give me a copy of the materials, which is really nice. So she told me how much the people who had done that, I think they did it this past summer, were fascinated by the book and got a lot out of it. So I finished the Consecration to Saint Joseph book that you guys had recommended from Father Don Calloway. So I finished that on Father's Day, and I thought, what am I going to do next? So I started this book. It's so dense. Not that it's hard to read or hard to understand, but I'll read a paragraph and then I have to stop and think about it and let it really sink in. I'll read the same paragraph 2-3 times, because again, it's not like it's too hard for me to understand, but it's so deep that you have to really let it soak in. So when I do adoration, I usually take that book with me, and I'll just sit there and read and reread and think about it and talk to God about what I'm reading.
The thing that strikes me is that you rarely think of like any flaws that you have or sinfulness as something you need to quote unquote accept.
Yeah.
But it's in realizing that through God, this becomes spiritual poverty. In other words, he can take our weaknesses and use those for his own glory if we're humble.
Sure. Right. Yeah. So again, I have a tendency to beat myself up a lot about, where my weak spots are and things that I do. But it was very encouraging to me to read that and just hear, like, God made me this way for whatever reason, and again, you look back on things that happened in my life and I think, why did that have to happen? But I've been really fascinated lately by, like, rolling back the thread of things that are connected together in my life. So I started at Trinity Middle School and I was teaching math and computer science. I got married to Russ. I quit teaching. I was home. Kenny passed away, I made a choice to take American Sign Language. I didn't have to do that. And I worked as an interpreter for 9 years. I decided I want to go back to teaching. Well, when I became an interpreter, I met Sister Michelle Grugerich, who was in charge of the Office for Disabilities for the diocese. She had me interpreting the Mass on TV on Channel 11 and doing some other things in the diocese. I decided to go back to teaching. I talked to her about it, and she said, you ought to apply to Catholic schools. They're always looking for teachers there. And because of that, I got the job at Bishop Canevin.
To be a math teacher, right?
To be a math.
Now, is your favorite shape a rhombus?
Yes.
See, I'm a
trapezoid.
I'm a trapezoid type of
We've
person.
talked about this.
Why do you like the rhombus?
Yeah, well, why do you like the trapezoid?
Because I like the ever-expanding end zones. My
okay.
dad used to play football with us, and we would play on a tennis court. And you think the two ends of the tennis court have a trapezoid type of line if you draw it to the corner of the of the fencing. So I like the fact that the trapezoid's a never changing type of thing with those lines.
Okay. I thought it was a Penguins thing with the goalies.
I don't know if the Penguins, there might be a goalie trapezoid somewhere, which I do like. But that's not really the reason why I like the trapezoid.
All right. Well, I like rhombuses because they're so misunderstood. People don't really understand what a rhombus is. They think it's it's a four-sided quadrilateral that's equal all four sides are congruent.
Okay.
So a square is a rhombus, and that blows people's minds because they think it has to be a diamond. It's just a thing. I could tell you about in middle school, one of my daughters, well, it was Emily, she had a teacher who marked that wrong on a test or a quiz or something.
What was the question?
The question was, is a square a rhombus?
And what did she say?
She said yes, and the teacher marked it wrong, and I hit the roof, and I became that tiger mom, and I know my name is Karen. I am not that meme Karen, okay? Typically, I usually let it go, but to me, I'm like, it's wrong, and that's.
So then you went to Bishop Canevin.
Right.
You started as a math teacher and ended as the principal. How did that happen?
Yeah, that was a surprise. I taught math for 4 years. There were some reorganizations of schools in the diocese, so they needed somebody to become the principal. I had my master's in administration, but I never really aspired to be a principal, but I was convinced that it might be a good thing. So again, I became the principal. I met you.
Right. I was assigned as a chaplain, and she was my boss.
Right. Yeah, I remember that well. Do you remember when I met you?
No, I don't.
I remember the day I met you.
Where were we?
We were at Canevin.
I know. Was it in your office?
It was a special day for you.
It was my birthday?
It was.
That's right. It was a Sunday.
It was your 40th birthday.
My 40th birthday. That's right.
That was the day I met you.
What were we doing? Yeah.
We had a opening of the school year mass at Canevin, and you came down to
to do the mass there for my birthday. Okay. But Bishop Canevin went through a really neat transition, which I thought was fascinating to watch, which was to head towards an Ignatian style of spirituality. What does that mean, an Ignatian spirituality? And how do you take a school that perhaps didn't necessarily have a spiritual heritage, although it had a Franciscan heritage, but the Franciscans weren't there as much anymore, and become Ignatian? What does that mean, and how does that add anything to a school?
Yeah, so Ken Sinagra was the president of the school. He's since retired, and his son had gone to John Carroll University, and he was just impressed with the Ignatian spirituality that was, encompassed there. So you're right, we were pretty much a Catholic school that was just, fine, but he wanted to find a way to infuse the life of the faith of our students, and thought if we brought Ignatian spirituality into it, it would just enliven the faith life of our students. So we started doing the examen. I think we started doing it once a week, and then we're doing it every day.
So the examen, is that like a monthly test you have to take?
No, the examen is part of the practices of Ignatian spirituality, and I've been doing it every day for probably close to 10 years now, where you look back at your day, or you can look back at your week or your month or your year or whatever, but typically you look back at the end of your day and you thank God for the gifts that you've been given. You ask him to shine a spotlight in the things that he would like you to see from your day that were important. And you pray through them, like, where did you fail? Where could you have done better? What things went well? What would you like to repeat? What would you like to put aside or go to confession and say, this was not something I should have done. And then you make a promise to do better in the next day. So it's really good, I think, as a preparation for confession, first of all, but also you see, like, at the end of the day, if you're saying the same things day after day, I fell into this trap of doing this thing I don't want to be doing. It's a good way for you to look back and, make a better commitment for doing better in the future.
It definitely, one of the great gifts of St. Ignatius of Loyola was the spiritual exercises. And part of the spiritual exercises was doing an examen prayer. And it's something that had been now part of our tradition. Definitely there's an examen of conscience that you can do directly related to a confession. But I find one of the best parts of the examen prayer is just simply asking yourself the question, how did God love me today? What were the manifestations of God's love for me today? Like, for example, yesterday, before I went to bed, I did it, and I'd just gone out to dinner with my cousin, Father Chris, and he shared with me that Saint Maria Goretti was his #1 saint, the top saint. I'm like, whoa, that was like amazing. That was the feast day.
Feast day, yeah.
And so he started to talk about the preaching about Saint Maria Goretti and how and I just went to bed last night thinking, wow, what a gift that is to have a cousin that's like his #1 saint. And then who Saint Maria Goretti is, a little girl who defends her purity and dies a martyr for that. And just so inspiring. So I think sometimes the examen prayer, when it has the focus of how is God shining a spotlight of love on me, rather than what are my sins and I need to get away with, it becomes really an amazing prayer. I would invite everybody to explore the examen prayer and to do that. So at the school, how else did you guys try to inculcate the nation's spirituality? Did you have any days away, or did you talk about any of the great Jesuits?
Yeah, so we decided to do a house system, nothing like Harry Potter. No, we're not going there. But yeah, so we had the kids research different famous Jesuit saints or priests or whomever. And so we separated the kids into 4 houses, which were Ronner House, Faber House, Casca House, and Ricci House, named after 4 different Jesuits. So we had a lot of fun with that. The kids really took to that. And, they researched the saints. They did work together. And in each house, we had kids from seniors, juniors, sophomore, and freshmen. So that it was a way to build community across grade levels. Because often when you're a freshman, seniors don't want any part of you. But if you get them together, working together, it's a good thing. So we would have what we called a day away once every quarter. And on that day, you got to dress down, you got to wear your house t-shirt. And then we would do some fun activities. Like the first year, we gave them all this weird stuff like 2x4s and scooters and everything. And they had to get from one end of the gym to the other without touching the floor. And they had to work together. They had to get everybody from their house from one end of the gym to the other. So community building stuff, but also some spiritual stuff. And we did service projects. We went down to the city mission in Washington once and did some service projects there. So it was just, you're working as a community within the school. That was really the gist of it.
And so the missionary lifestyle at Bishop Canavan and that brought you then into parish life. What would you say are some of the qualities that you had to transition or bring from being a math teacher, principal, to Saints John and Paul and being part of the ministry?
Well, I brought my detention slips with me. Father Joe is the only one that's received one so far. Yeah,
that's good. Father Joe Carr. Hopefully he'll get another one because he tends to really be on the fringe.
You got to watch him.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. I think just organizational skills. So I used to have to make up the student schedule at Canavan. Now here I'm making up the schedule for the priests. It's only 4 priests, so that's a little better than a couple hundred students. But that scheduling kind of mentality has been helpful.
I think she's been a little too humble there. We have lots of, if you look at our calendar, there's like overlays of calendars, and then you expand Saints John and Paul, which in and of itself has plenty of activities and stuff going on. Then you expand it to our valley parishes, and we have 3 more, so it becomes a great grouping thing. Plus you have to deal with characters like me, Father Joe, Father Jack, Father Mike, and all of that. So That's quite a
It's
undertaking,
a
right?
good, yeah,
'Cause
juggling act some
make
days,
sure a
yeah.
priest shows up for a confession and all those
Right,
types of
right.
things.
You've
What's
done
it
well.
like to work on the clergy team? What's it like for you? I don't know if you've had interactions. So one of our things that we try to do on Wednesdays is we get together for a holy hour as our clergy team, and then we'll have about an hour meeting or so, and then maybe head out to dinner. But what is I don't know, what you get to see priests from a facet that maybe most don't to see. We're not usually, I mean, we're wearing our clergyman, but we're not necessarily dressed up in vestments in high liturgy. We're kind of in our work mode. What have you
Yeah.
learned from that, or what have you been surprised by? Or
Oh, you really want me to talk
yeah, I
about
do.
that?
I mean, I think a lot of people want to know what priests are like
Yeah.
behind the scenes. So to
Well,
speak.
you're human, right?
That's
So, I
true.
mean, lots of good conversation. It's interesting to see things from people's perspective. Again, like just making up the schedule, sometimes I'll be like, well, this will work. But then you get in conversation and like Father Joe has experience in Good Samaritan and other churches down there in the valley. And he'll say this, you're not going to be able to do that this way there. And then, Father Jack and Father Mike both also have a lot of experience. So just hearing different viewpoints, I think it's also interesting that, you think of Catholicism, or people think of Catholicism as being very rigid and just has to be this one way. But then you hear all these different flavors from the four of you, like we could go about it this way, or we could go about it this way. And that's been pretty cool to see. But I really like when I get to come to your holy hour beforehand, because that's just really nice. I think I feel very honored to go into the grotto right now and just spend time in adoration. That's been really good.
Yeah, I know for me, I was originally, I went to a religious community, the Legionaries of Christ. And as I realized the Lord was leading me to Pittsburgh to become a diocesan priest, one of the biggest challenges of diocesan priesthood is the more of the working on your own type of a lifestyle. Where the religious community, I lived with brother priests and all that. And so I was really craving the opportunity to at least have in a holy hour pray the evening prayer together, and then be able to just look at our work together as a team. And so we also have some deacons on the team, which adds a lot of flavor as well.
Yeah, I'm the only girl.
You're the only girl. That's true. That's why I call it clergy team with a K, because of Karen. So people took a while to pick that up. When you transitioned from Bishop Canavan to Saints John and Paul, you spent some time with Father Mac and with Sister Annie. What was that like? And I know that was a long time ago. Now
it seems a long time ago now.
Pre-COVID-19. It seems like a century ago.
It does.
Do you remember that? And what was?
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the interesting thing was I had been a parishioner at St. Gabe's again, and I joined St. Gabe's Parish in 1990. That was right after Father Mac left there. So a lot of Father Mac, I think, and Father Haney have some similarities. So it was funny when I joined here and Father Mac left, I did say to him, I said, I don't think you know me that well, but you're departing every time I show up. And I said, but if you weren't, I just missed him basically.
In fact, I think Father
times.
Mac preached at Father Haney's funeral.
He did, yeah. He did a great imitation of Father Haney. He had his voice done and his mannerisms. Yeah, I think he referred to him as his spiritual father here on earth because his father had died, quite a while ago. And I think while he was at St. Gabe's. So yeah, Father Haney was his spiritual father here on earth. But being able to shadow Sister Annie for a month, I mean, that rarely happens when you get a new job. Usually you're just kind of thrust in there and, figure it out yourself. But I did follow Sister Annie around. I remember I kept asking you, what am I supposed to be doing? You should just follow Sister Annie and figure out everything that she's doing. So I did that. And that was a real blessing. She's a wonderful person and certainly had a lot on her plate when she was here. I think since that time, we've discerned it's better to responsibilities to be delegated a little bit differently. But yeah, it was awesome. Just she introduced me to a lot of parishioners, and that's been a real blessing to me. So many parishioners came up to me, and I know they were not happy with the changes going on with the on-mission process, but a lot of people said to me, here's who I am. If you need something, call me, ask me, I'll help you or walk you through that. Same with our staff. Our staff has been just awesome to welcome me with all my little
What's
quirks.
it like been working with the staff here at St. John and Paul?
Well, I am amazed at the talent that we have on our staff. And I mean, I'll just point out Lee and Angie, who are doing this broadcast, right? That the fact, I think the amazing thing to me is it's a beautiful church, and I think a wealthy parish overall compared to a lot of other parishes. But the people in our parish chose to give money to the church, and they used really good decision making about things that they installed. It's a beautiful church, but the fact that we were able to do live streaming when a lot of other churches were not able to, the fact that who hired all of these people, these are all like excellent people that could work anywhere. But we invested in really good staff members at our church. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're able to do the things that we're able to do here.
Well, I feel the same way. It's an honor. It's the dream team. It's definitely being able to work side by side with our staff is incredible. I think the COVID-19 and the Corona time has shown the real stripes of our staff and the ability to be able to adjust, to serve, to be able to continue our mission of getting people to heaven, where I think it could have easily been a disaster for our parish. It's basically because of the way in which our staff has been able to adjust to some of the Corona time things that we've had to do, Talk a little bit about some of the facets of your own work in terms of some of the ministries and things that you do with, especially like the Bible studies with Anne McCarthy.
So I brought my list.
Yeah, go ahead. You can pull it out.
I refer to my list. Adult Bible studies, which Donna Lopez and Anne McCarthy facilitate, have tons of people from our parish and other parishes that come to join, and they do a fantastic job. Anne is a former teacher, so she prepares her lesson. She has a little folder she gives me with her lesson plans and everything that she's planning to do. They're just so well organized, and that's why people love coming back. There's some people that come to Bible study year after year, and what are we going to study next? And what better way as an adult to get more excited about your faith than to just delve into all of these different topics. So they've done a wonderful job. The bereavement group is another group of people that, that's one group that I would like to see us expand upon. So they help with all the funeral preparations, but they also do the candlelight mass that we do around All Souls Day each year to honor everybody who passed in the past year. And they've helped with the grief programs that we've tried to establish. I really would like to take that group and expand some more and do some more. That's originally where the Call for Help initiative that we've been doing, that's where the idea for that came from. So when the coronavirus hit, I was at home thinking, how are we going to respond to this? What are we going to do? And I thought of Denise Farian, because Denise is on the bereavement team, and her job is, once we have a funeral, she will follow up with the family. She'll call like a month later and maybe 2 months later and just follow up. How are you doing? Have you, do you know about our grief programs? Do you know what you could get involved in? And I thought, you know what, I ought to ask Denise if she's free, if she could take on calling our older parishioners, because our focus at first was, we're thinking older parishioners will be suffering the most. So I called her, and she was on it in a minute, and got volunteers, and they called everybody over the age of 70, which I forget how many that was. It was a pretty substantial amount. And then you said, we ought to call everybody.
It's a small task.
Yeah. And I said that to Denise, and she went, oh, okay. And she dove into it. And we put a call out for, anybody who wants to volunteer making calls. And people responded. People responded right away. And, I think we were thinking that older people would be the ones most isolated and suffering the most from the pandemic. But it's really a broad swath of people. I think about my daughter, Emily, who's in Portland, right? Who was told she had to work from home. So she's isolated in the town. Well, she has more friends now than when she first moved there, but she's not with me. If something happened to her, how would I get there?
Right.
I know people who, like in my case, have lost a spouse. I'm home alone with my dog. And, I'm not in that older range quite yet, but I'm struggling with loneliness and being isolated from other people. So people have lost their jobs and the stress that is causing on families. So calling everyone in our parish and in our grouping was just such a great idea. I've had so many people thank us for that. Just like, I didn't need anything, but thank you for calling me to see how I'm doing.
I think that what you were able to do, and then what our staff was able to do, is reach out to those who were in our grouping, but also those who were most vulnerable during the Corona time. And the expansion of the outreach, the expansion of the food bank has created its own branch now of work within our grouping. But to me, one of the things is that how do we facilitate a way in which the gifts of our parishioners can be used to serve others, to first and foremost receive Jesus, and then be able to love others the way Jesus loves us? And I think doing that in those ministries was a part of that. What about like Senior Connection and some of the missionary types of things?
So Senior Connection, again, was struggling. Their leader, Mike Hines, moved. And so they were in a transition period anyway. And then when the coronavirus hit, often what their job has been is to go into people's houses and do some repairs. And we didn't feel comfortable doing that because it's senior citizens, one of the most vulnerable groups. So they have transitioned into doing just outdoor work. Because we were not able to go on our mission trip this summer, we're trying to pair Senior Connection and some of the mission trip participants together and have work days come up that we can all kind of band together and get out there and do some of the work. So the next work day is July 25th, Saturday.
Are there still spots open?
Yes,
July
please.
25th.
Yeah, sign up. We need
people
help
out there that want to help rake leaves, paint some houses.
Right. Do some small repair work. No skills needed. The people who are the leaders, the worksite leaders, will help you with the skills that are needed. You just need to show up. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Before we take some questions, which I'd love to turn on to, anybody who has any questions can fire away some questions, and we're going to be giving away the book that Karen had recommended by Jacques Philippe on the life and on just the humility of Saint Therese. It's called The Way of Trust and Love of Saint Therese by Jacques Philippe. Before we do get to questions, one last thing, which is adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. It's something that I believe you said that your mom did with you or brought to your attention when you were little. It's something that you've discovered in your own faith growth, and now I see you here in a lawn chair outside, adoring Jesus outside. So what is the impact you think it's had on you personally, and why is Eucharistic adoration something vital to a parish?
Right. So I watched your interview with Dr. Peter Howard. Yeah, I just watched it last night. Yeah. And he was talking about just getting your eyes used to seeing Jesus in the Eucharist. I thought that was really, really a good point. And also his comment that when we go to adoration, sometimes we say, "Listen, Lord, your servant is speaking," when we should be saying, "Listen," or what is it? Now that I said it backwards, I can't say it forward straight. I'm listening, Lord. I want to hear you speak. So your servant is listening. So when I go to adoration, I often come in.
Speak, Lord, your servant is listening.
Thank you.
But we always say, "Listen, Lord, I'm speaking."
Yeah, listen to me, Lord.
Yeah.
So when I go to adoration, often I'm running in a mess. Like I just got off the phone or off the computer, and I'm like all, jangled. And I sit down, and often I begin just like I can't think what to do. So I start with, "Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you." And I just repeat that in my mind many, many times until I could feel myself calming down. And then I try to still myself and be open to what God might want to say to me. And it's just brought a lot of peace in my life. And I told you, I crave it now. I can't wait till we have it back in the grotto. I mean, that's one of the perks of working in our parish, is that 20 steps away is our grotto where had been perpetual adoration. So I can't wait till that exists again. But I think a lot of people think, I don't know what I should do in adoration. It doesn't matter. You just get in there and spend an hour or spend 15 minutes if that's all you can spend, and just start with Jesus, I trust in you, or Lord, help me, or, anything of that nature. And then just try to still yourself and be
I know
open.
for me, Fulton Sheen was a big inspiration, but just getting to know the priesthood as my discernment, that was very important, doing that. Because there's nothing more fruitful, there's nothing more important, there's no human activity that can be more important than receiving Jesus. And just simply being in silence, receiving his presence has such an amazing effect.
So I do remember when my husband died and I reached out to you for some help.
Yeah.
That was the advice you gave me, was at Canavan, go in the chapel every day. And the Eucharist wasn't exposed, but it was there in the tabernacle, and just spend time there. And that really meant a lot.
Yeah, I know that when my grandfather died, I spent a lot of time in front of the Blessed Sacrament, because I realized that the closest there is to Jesus, the closer you are to Jesus, the closer you are to those who have passed. And through Christ, we can connect with those who we care about and love, and that we miss so much. And he's there for us. So let's take some questions, see what we have out there in our wonderful. So have you brought St. Joseph into the hearts of those struggling? Go to St. Joseph, patron saint of dying. This is a fabulous question. And I know Karen is just, if you ever go into Karen's office, if you talk to Karen, she never goes without 5 minutes about talking about St. Joseph. So talk about St. Joseph.
So I joke that St. Joseph keeps interjecting himself into my life, and lots of, whenever I stop thinking about him, he will pop up. So, yeah, I mentioned that on our 25th anniversary, we went up to Montreal, and we're at St. Joseph's Oratory. And when we were there, for some strange reason, my husband picked up a prayer card for St. Peregrine, which, at the time he didn't know he had cancer. So that was pretty interesting. The consecration to St. Joseph was really powerful for me. And just as a single person, a single woman, who is trying to navigate through a lot of challenges in life, I look at the image of St. Joseph in his life, and he was had no quotations in the Bible, right? He didn't use a lot of words. He just did what God asked him to do, and believed and trusted in God, and led his family to safety, led Jesus and Mary to safety when needed. And when I'm feeling troubled and like I'm not sure what to do, I always pray to St. Joseph to help guide me.
We did a series of the Exploring Catholicism, which I invite anybody who wants to go deeper into St. Joseph, with Father Don Calloway. Tremendous book on the consecration of St. Joseph, which you mentioned. And one of my favorite facets of St. Joseph, he does a lot of great work sleeping.
Yes.
And I appreciate that. I wish I could do that as well. Just receiving God, even in the sleep, we can do that. Let's see if we have any more questions out there. Okay, Emily would like to know, how is it working at the church, or similar to teaching?
I thought Emily was going to ask, when are we going to the zoo?
Okay, when are we going to the zoo? You want to know that too?
That was our
question. Yeah, that's a good question.
So working in a church, how is it similar to teaching? Well, I will say that I do miss teaching. I miss teaching and working with young people. That is something that I miss a lot. But I think, just again, looking back at the chain of things, when I became the principal at Canavan and I got involved in Ignatian spirituality, and I got to spend a lot more time talking to kids about faith than a math teacher typically does, right? So, and then I got to help with the mission trip and really dive into that part of it. And so learning to talk to people about my faith, you wouldn't think of that, in teaching. I was in a Catholic school, so obviously that was part of it. So that experience of teaching and having that role helped me be more open to talking about my faith with other people. And that's certainly been helpful here in the job that I have.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see if we have another question out there. Karen, what is the most rewarding part of your job at Saints John and Paul, besides working with Father Jay?
Yeah, working with Father Jay. I was going to say Father Mike. But okay.
Oh, really? Jeez. Okay.
Well, I think I kind of touched on it, that first, it's just a holy atmosphere. I mean, it's awesome to be able to work in a church. I mean, but our people that I work with live it. I mean, that one conversation, that one day we were having a staff lunch together, and I don't remember how the topic came up about what does the Blessed Mother, how's the Blessed Mother in your life? And everyone had a comment about it. And I thought, oh my gosh, all of these people that I'm surrounded with are so faith-filled. And that's just an awesome experience to know that you're talking the same language. You can talk about your faith and nobody goes, oh wow, it's just it's like soaked in. And then I've met enough parishioners who the same thing, they are just so deeply into their faith. It's not just that we're showing up to church out of some kind of Catholic guild or something like that. They're really, really in love with the Lord. And that's like the best part of my job.
I agree with you. I think the staff that we have inspires me to just want to be a holier priest, pushes me to be a better Christian and somebody who really does want to be a saint. And so I agree with you. It's amazing our staff meetings and the way we are able to work things. It's always a temptation to just be all administrative and just get things done, rather than be present to really be able to learn and be able to pray with each other. Maybe one last question before we conclude here. Hi, Karen. When you have the task of assigning some Old Testament names, especially multiple names in a row, do you practice before Mass the abbreviation Zach for Zacharias, A for Abimelech?
Good question. So Rick and Anna actually are parents of two students that I taught at Canevin.
They're good musicians as well.
Oh yeah. So well, I love when you do Eucharistic prayer number 1.
Oh,
where
that's my favorite.
They
Good luck translating that.
Yeah, the saints. So you have to finger spell all of those names. So actually Adam Boyle was reading one of the first readings when he did them at one of the weekday masses, and or I guess it was a weekend, but he was like, I don't know these names. And I said, just like do it with confidence, and I have to spell them. But yeah, when you rattle off Linus, Cletus, Lemon, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's challenging.
That gets challenging.
I try to practice ahead of time. I had not worked as an interpreter for about 15 years before we decided this might be a good idea this time around. And I did sweat it at home a couple of times, but once I got going, it was fine. Yeah.
I just thought it was a great thing to offer our community during this Corona time. It was nice that you opened yourself up to doing that, and I think you got some good feedback from
it. Did. And I hear from families that their kids are picking up some signs and would like to learn some more, and that's good. Yeah.
Well, really appreciate you taking time to stop by our studios here and to be able to discuss a little bit behind the scenes of our work and share your own life with us. I think anytime the Lord works through a soul, there's a story there. And thanks for sharing that story and helping us be able to do that. I can't wait till next week when we're going to be joined by Tom Rooney, fellow Steeler fan, somebody who as well is a parishioner and member of our great grouping. He is heading up a lot of great things here. He's on our finance council, but to get good Rooney stories in Pittsburgh is really going to be cool. I'm looking forward to that.
So that's actual terrible town, not the biblical one.
Exactly. Well, they used to call Myron Cope, who invented the terrible town, kind of like the Pope of Pittsburgh.
Right.
So he was Jewish, but I think I don't know how that works out. But at any rate, Pope, Cope, they're trying to do something there. I don't know why I got on that subject. But anyway, we're trying to close out the show, so we got to be serious here. So yeah, Tom Rooney joined us next Tuesday, July 14th at 2 p.m. And as we started with a prayer from St. Ignatius, I thought we'd conclude with this prayer that's one of your favorites from Father Rupe, who was the general director of the Jesuits, and that will conclude. Nothing is more practical than finding God, that is, than falling in love, in a quite absolute final way. What you are in love with, what seizes your imagination, will affect everything. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the morning, what you do with your evenings, how you spend your weekends, what you read, whom you know, what breaks your heart, and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. Amen.